what we're going to look at tonight is the Amazonic as part of the Organic House course. So obviously I didn't know about the Amazonic when we first started the course, but I really want to put a spotlight on this because it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It really is in a lot of different ways. So I'm going to just break it down in terms of the info. So we're probably going to go about an hour tonight on this because I've got some examples to break down. But this instrument, this contact library, is pretty much the ultimate Organic House like collection of instruments. And I've got Antonio Tioli, the guy from the Amazonic, on the podcast next week, and it's a brilliant conversation. It's probably my favourite episode of Beyond the Studio so far, of the ones that we've recorded specifically for the podcast. Of course, Patrice will never be beaten, but you know what I mean. So basically, the Amazonic is a contact library, and what makes it particularly nice and particularly interesting is that it was actually mostly recorded in the Amazon rainforest. There were some instruments, I think they said it's about 50-50 in terms of the instruments, but notwithstanding all of that, the instruments are actually native, real indigenous, proper instruments from a real Amazonian tribe that lives in the Amazon rainforest just outside Manaus in Brazil, which Antonio went with a small crew of people, and actually recorded a lot of the instruments there. And within that, there's a huge amount of percussion, woodwinds of various different elements, really nice textural stuff, some interesting vocal stuff as well, which obviously is great for Organic House, some beautiful plucked instruments, like, say, for example, charangos and stuff like that as well. And as I say, they're all traditional, historic instruments, actually, not just played by the tribes themselves, but they make them, so it's pretty impressive. Like it's pretty overwhelming, to be honest. So yeah, that is why I wanted to do almost like a specific piece of bonus content just for this, because I've had quite a lot of fun with this recently, and there's also another reason for it, which we're going to get into now. So we'll take a look at the website in a moment, but one of the things I wanted to talk about was the pricing. So there is actually some free instruments on there, and it ranges all the way up to what they call the complete edition, which is $249. Now, I kind of appreciate that, not everybody's got that kind of money, but what I will say is that socially this is really, really important, because this is the first time I've seen a company do this, where what they actually do is take 30% of the profits and send that directly back to the tribes that they worked with on these recordings and other good causes, which help to serve to, preserve the Amazon rainforest, which is massively important, and also with various other organizations that are helping to keep tribes like these safe in the time of the pandemic and everything else. And it's a wonderful thing, and it's something that, you'll hear it more when you listen to episode 14 of the podcast next week with Antonio, the guy behind the Amazonic. This is something that's really deeply close to my heart, having benefited massively from Amazonian culture in my own sort of personal development over the last few years. But it's a wonderful social thing. So not only can you make amazing music with these things, you can actually help make the world a slightly better place for people who need it. So it's a wonderful thing. Now, the good news about this as well, before we even get into it, is that we've actually got a discount code for 30% off. Again, NYT AAA members may have seen the announcement on the Facebook group, but if you haven't, you can use this code at the checkout on the Amazonic website, which we're going to look at in a moment. So basically, if you just use Paul Nolan 30, exactly how it is on the screen, you get 30% off. And basically, you get 30% off, and the profits still go to the people who need it. So yeah, I'm really really excited about this, both as a social enterprise thing, which obviously we try and be as conscious and as aware as possible here at NYT, and also do as much good while we're hopefully making the world a better place with music as well. So yeah, very very cool. So couple of questions here. Does it work in the player, or do you need full contact? I will find out for you. I mean, I have the full contact and it works perfectly. I've got a sneaky feeling you might need the full version of contact for it, but it is brilliant. And here's another question. How did you find out here about them today? Check the website. It looks super. Do you know what? I get into that in the podcast next week, and it's a quite ironic thing, actually, that this is one of those rare occasions where personalized advertising worked really really well, because I actually found out through these guys through Instagram ads. Literally just popped up on my timeline, and as soon as I saw it I was like, what is this exactly? And I needed to know more. So fantastic that I managed to find them, or they found me through Instagram. And immediately, as soon as I went through to the website, I knew it would be something that we'd want to cover and something I would like to purchase. And again, with the social elements as well. And basically, I contacted Antonio from there and got him on the podcast. So all good. All good. Right, okay. Full retail version of Contact 6 or later required. Yes. Do you get it to install in the library in Contact? You actually don't. It's one of those where you can basically open up the NKIs through the browser. We'll go through that in a second because I've got a session here that I'm going to show you. So there you go. There is the Amazonic, as I screw up the screen here. Yeah, so there you go. So there you go. So very pleased with that. So let's have a little look at the Amazonic website, as you can see here. And yeah, basically, you go to theamazonic.com, as you can see in the top here. As you can see, there are free editions of some of the instruments. You've got producer edition and composer edition. I mean, just go the whole hog and buy complete edition. That's what my recommendation would be. Again, more money for those who need it most, as well as anything else. What I do like as well is that you may notice that actually they offer some of the instruments individually, as well as the collections. So if you just want a particular thing, you can have that. Now, one thing I do really like here is that I need to ask Antonio about this and find out what's going on. But, through the Organic House course, we've recorded instruments that I own, like, chimes and rain sticks and singing bowls and all that kind of good stuff. And it's always great to do that. And in this boutique section here, although I've noticed that everything is currently sold out, I believe this is going to become something of a marketplace where you'll be able to buy instruments from the tribe that they make themselves for your own personal use, which I really, really like the idea of that. It's absolutely brilliant. And again, like these wonderful people who, they really, really, do amazing things. They're real guardians of the rainforest, and their traditions have lasted for thousands of years. It's an amazing thing for us to be able to simultaneously fulfill our passion for music and help these people, because they are beautiful, beautiful people. And, I hope one day to actually go and visit and meet them in person and to, feel that. So absolutely amazing. So just to answer this question, will it work in earlier Contact versions or the latest version? I'm looking at the website to find the requirements of it. As I said here before, full retail version of Contact 6 or later required. So there you go. So with that being said, here I am again in Ableton, and we are going to take a little bit of a look at the Amazonic itself. So let us do that without any sort of further delay. So as you can see, You know, it's a it's a very simple Ableton Live 11 session, but there's plenty in here. Okay, sorry, I'm just distracted by questions. Sean, looks amazing, Paul. I noticed some of the synth instruments and vocals sounded great on the demos. Can we get them also? I believe so. I mean, I've got the full version, so I think that maybe some of the demo tracks might have synths in that aren't included in it, but the vocals are definitely there, because everything here is completely organic. So anyway, let's have a little bit of a run through, shall we, and see where we're at. So here we go. So I'm just gonna play you part of it, and again, I've got some instruments here that are not playing, but I've divided them into the various categories. Now, one of the other things that I really like as well, which we'll look at towards the end, is the fact that when you do buy these instruments, it can be a little bit confusing because, quite frankly, like us in the Western world, so to speak, are not familiar with these types of instruments, how they're played, what they're for, what their purpose is, because everything in these kinds of, traditional Amazonian, tribal, indigenous environments and cultures, every instrument serves a purpose. Everything's got a reason to it. And it's beautiful to be able to read this digital booklet because it just gives you a little bit of an insight into what these instruments are there for. Because, again, a lot of these communities, the way that they work with sound is that it's a therapeutic thing. They work with it in ceremony. They work with it to, protect people from, evil spirits, if you will, to help heal people, etc., etc. And it's a beautiful thing. It really, really is. So to have an insight into what the intention and the purpose these instruments have is a really, really important thing because you can integrate that into your own music. And I'm already finding that it's taken like a lot of the organic stuff that I'm making to another level. So with that being said, let's have a little listen to a bit of a drum loop I've made, and I've added a few little extras to it. Now, the only things that you are going to hear that are not from the Amazonic is within the context here of the drums. So I've got my sort of regular awesome kick that everyone's seen me use about 1 million times, and a hand clap that I just kind of layered as I was working with this a little bit earlier in the day. One of the things you'll notice is that actually as well, the EQ here is the only real bit of processing that I'm doing. The only other thing I'm doing is sending some stuff to a reverb, and even then, it's not even the big sexy sort of hybrid reverb in some cases, or there's a little bit of that. It's our good old-fashioned kind of accelerator reverb that we've been using for a long time, the old PN stock reverb as it was known at one stage. So with that being said, let's have a listen. So yeah, I mean, you can hear it straight away. So the thing is, as I say, no processing on any of this at all. So let's just work it, one at a time, basically. So I actually started literally from here. And if we just open up here with our contact, you should be able to see that quite nicely over here. Make that a little bit smaller. What I love about the Amazonic is that it's incredibly simple. So there's no sort of like big complicated kind of like mixer sections or like grooves or anything like that. It's very, very simple. You've got loops in sort of the orange keys here, sort of like, rips and little fills and stuff on the blue keys, and basically single hits on the green keys here. And the thing that I love the most, starting off with this, which is kind of the basis of the groove. And as you can probably see here, it's like basically just like a single groove, a single thing, which is quite cool. That's totally fine. You can see that it is basically just a synced element. But what I love about this, if we just carry on playing this, is the ability to really tune the sound in a number of different ways. It has an onboard reverb, and really, there's not that much to it. You literally just turn the reverb on or off, or you just decide how much reverb you want, or you can turn it all the way down. Simple. Just doesn't need to be too complicated. Mod Wheel in general is not really mapped to anything. It is just a really nice, simple interface. It's about as complicated as it gets. But what I do like is that you've got 4 close mics and an overhead mic. So if I just switch some of these on and off, you'll get an idea about what I mean. So it changes the sound quite dramatically. So let's listen to each one in isolation. So you get a real low rumble there on close 2. So really great for layering the same sound, right? There's close 3, close 4, and then the overhead mic. So each one of these mic positions is creating a different element within the sound, essentially. It's almost like 4 or 5 different layers, 4 close mic layers with the overhead kind of gluing everything together. So you can decide how dry you want it, how wide you want it, how low you want it, how mid-range, how high, not only by switching these mic positions on and off, but also by delicately balancing each one, so you can effectively make this fit into your track without really any form of EQ or processing. It's very, very flexible. So that's what I've worked on this. And again, you can see here, like, the instrument is a kind of a take on the, you know, a take on the bongo, if you will, or a conga, for example. It's called an amasador macaco. And again, that's a bit of a mouthful for somebody like me. However, what's really great is, again, if we just have a little look here, I'm just going to drop over into preview, and you'll see that there is a manual, basically. And again, you can see in the contents, everything is color-coded, and I've tried to color-code it as closely as possible in Ableton as possible. However, if I go into here, you'll see, there you go, very first instrument, the Amasador Macaco. If we just zoom in on that a touch, you'll see exactly what I mean. So, it's known as an Amasador drum, used in the Marabaixo party in the state of Amapá, Brazil, together with the snare and singing. So again, it's actually naming the actual player, which is fantastic. So yes, very, very cool. Very cool indeed. So again, like, you'll get more information in some of these things. So again, you'll get that as part of the Amazonica when you download it. And it's very, very useful indeed. So it's a great musical education, as well as being able to use these really, really nice sounding instruments. So again, from there, you can move on into the next. And after that, we've got a more modern looking drum, which is known as a surdo, which is, you know, a very big and popular drum in, like, say, the film scoring world. I mean, it looks a bit more contemporary. You know, it's a bit more of like a kick drum looking kind of thing. But that's actually what's providing that kind of like bumping kind of bass in the track. So basically that's it. It's like, it's not actually doing much else other than that. So it's, again, very simple. Again, there's a lot of velocity layers going on. It's not just triggering single sounds. You'll get an appreciation of that a little bit later on. And again, like, that's a perfect kind of like bass or sub kick, that kind of thing. And then from here, we've got the caixa aguda. You're probably going to slaughter me for my pronunciation. I'm very sorry. But, you know, it all works. And what's quite interesting here, if you give this a listen, is that it's more of a fill that happens on the end of every 8 bars. So we'll get to that eventually. I'm just going to have to fill time for a second. There we go. And again, that's just like a held key. But what I've done there is kind of adjusted a little bit with more reverb. I've toned down some of the close mics and pumped up the overhead. So what I've done naturally is that I've placed that more in the back. So if I were to, say, for example, take the overheads off there and even just turn down the reverb, you'll get an idea of what I mean when this comes in. Or will you? Because it hasn't played for some reason. Let's just have a little listen to that. Okay. What's going on there? There you go. So it must be working with the overhead only, actually. There you go. So toning down the other instruments there, the other mics I should say, and pumping the reverb just allows me to place it naturally in the mix where I would like it to be. So if I was to just play that along with our drums, you've already got something sounding super live, super performed, really clean, really simple, and really textured without having to do anything. Just triggering the samples and just adjusting the levels of the mics and a little bit of reverb, and that's basically it. As you'll see in this session, absolutely no side chaining, no EQ, no clever compression, nothing. Just, you know, getting those elements to sit well together, and then from there adding a little bit of reverb where necessary, and that's it. So that's the low percussion. Sounds great, really happy with that. And again, we can move into the mid perk now, which there's only one layer, and there's this bongo. And again, very simple, but again, you've got these various different layers. You get different rhythms. You get that kind of more traditional kind of samba rhythm, if you will. So through a production, you could actually alternate between some of these loops because they're quite really nice in terms of how they integrate together as well. And again, some of the other more sort of lower down sounds, if I just get the right octave on my keyboard here, you get that little kind of double hit. And that kind of thing, you get the idea. And then just single hit, and you can hear the difference in tone of each one. And again, that subtle difference between the different kind of layers of the velocities and stuff as well. So yeah, I mean, layering that in with everything else. So just wonderful sounding already. Just really, you know, really just sits so beautifully. It really does. And I agree, like these sounds are so lovely and organic. And moving into the high perk, you know, we can go into some different instruments here as well on the higher end of the perk. You've got these like I mean, if you look at that and it's like, I'm not even sure what that is. You can look that up in the user guide. But let's have a little listen to it because it's actually like a clave. But again, it's like, it's unlike claves that you've heard, you know, more sort of in traditional sort of Western music. And even with a clave like that, it's like, because of the mic placements and the reverb, it just sits so wonderfully, you know, with everything else that we've already heard. So let's just have a little listen to that. And I noticed that instantly as I laid that in this afternoon into the groove. I was like, you know, normally claves, like they're quite hard to place because they're quite sharp. They're quite, you know, piercing. The attack can be quite nasty on some of them, especially the ones that I've played in natively myself, because I've got a set of claves here, and it can be difficult to kind of get them to sit right, but these are just so beautifully rendered and so beautiful sounding that it's hard to kind of like go wrong, really. So you've got, as they're called here, the Sapo Kururu. You've got also as well these other elements as well, like this tambor, which again is more on the high perk side of things, as you can see. And again, just another lovely little layer. And at this stage, I'm just layering things in based on frequency layers. Again, I've done the low perk, I've done the mid perk, we're into the higher stuff. And again, the Palominias. Again, almost like a kind of a wood block kind of vibe. And then these almost like kind of like shell-like things. So again, we play all of that together. So great for that sort of tribal thing, but again, they're also quite useful for the more sort of lighter kind of organic stuff, which is really, really nice, and you'll hear more examples of that as we go through. So moving on into the shakers, there's a couple of interesting things going on here. Actually, there's like sort of 5 different layers to this. And again, what you'll notice, like my CPU is very, very light considering the amount of instances of contact that I'm working with here. It's very, very interesting, and the fact that I'm actually live streaming as well. So that's a great sign. Very, very light on resources. And again, you get these little interesting, almost like kind of gyro, kind of like, this type of thing. I've just set that off on a slightly different rhythm. I'm just setting these rhythms off against each other. Just builds these wicked rhythms up. A check triplo. And again, it's just adjustments of reverb and the whole element of the mic positions. And this sort of shaker-like thing is, like, believe it or not, almost like a kind of a flute, which has like a shaker attached to it. So again, it's like, it's not like other libraries that we could talk about that we're big fans of that we've discovered in the last year, where it's very clean and, great sounding, really isolated sounds. Like, this is all about character. This is all about the beauty and the imperfections of these handmade instruments that mean so much to these people. So you've got those types of elements there. You've also got, and again, this is an interesting one, how I've kind of programmed it, because again, you'll look at this and it's like, it's almost like, it looks like a brush, it looks like a broom. But like these types of instruments are actually used as almost like shakers. And again, I've given it that bit of a bump and a bit of a groove, because you've got those 2 hits in there. So again, it's got this kind of natural groove to it. So programming in every 16th and then just adding in little other layers, and that single hit there, which actually the other instance here is literally the same instrument, providing like almost like that kind of open hat shaker as hi-hat. So let's just listen to that shakers group together. again, it's amazing when you start to really appreciate the intricacies of the layers here. It's like, you know, I've got like 30 channels of stuff going on already, really. So let's have a look at some other stuff. We've got we'll look at the vocals almost like to kind of finish, and the pluck stuff to finish. But the winds, again, there's like 4 or 5 layers to this as well. So when we sort of talk about winds, you can divide them into 2 categories. And again, how you kind of interact on this kind of level is you can go to the file browser. Everything is here. So it's not loadable from the library, but it's very, very easy to find within the context of the browser. To be honest with you, it's not really that different to working with the library. The library is just a slightly more convenient place. So, you know, in terms of, you've got low and high woodwind. So what I've got here is this Buzina Tariano. So again, if we sort of play that more towards the end. Yep, more towards the end there. That's not... Oh, it's playing. It's just low. Or are we not hearing it? I'll be one. So, very cool. And just to point out, like, you can get complete or contact 6 like outside of complete 13 if that's what you need, basically. I would look at that rather than having to feel like you've got to pay the whole hog to go to, you know, complete 13, I should say. So yeah, you've got these really interesting kind of low flutes here. And there's the return effects. So, very cool. So ultimately, you've got another one of these Buzina type sort of flutes. And again, these textures are really, really nice. And Kurt's asking whether or not you can tune the instruments. Certainly, through the tune function here at the top. Again, like, the other things to kind of bear in mind is that, like, these instruments, part of their character and part of their charm is the fact that they are kind of like not traditionally tuned to an extent, so you can be a little bit creative with that as well. And I think actually part of the wonder of them is like the fact that they don't always kind of fit, so then they produce some really interesting overtones that we just don't hear in Western music. So yeah, there's the Buzina de Bamboo, as it's known, which is kind of rolling off the tongue very nicely. And again, like this extra element here, which you'll hear right at the end, which does take it in a slightly darker direction, which is great for film scoring and stuff as well. Again, I imagine this type of thing is bowed, so you get these lovely atmospheres. Again, this one every 16 notes, 16 bars. So you get this just wonderful, really beautiful atmosphere from these gorgeous, like, low and high woodwinds and flutes and stuff. Again, like, these types of sounds are very prominent in organic house music, yet they're not really kind of like well talked about how you get this kind of sound. And often it's instruments like this, it's instruments like East West Raw, it's instruments like, you know, some other stuff in Contact on the sort of the Middle East end of things that, you know, really kind of go into this, but oftentimes they're quite hard to come by. So let's have a little bit of a listen to everything in Context so far, shall we? So now we move into the vocals. And again, what's really lovely is like you can see the instrument that you're playing, and in fact in this case you can see the man who is singing. So there's only like sort of like three little samples here, but again you'll notice I'm using them in very small chunks. If I was to hold that key, and it keeps going basically. So it's an amazing thing because like these are like traditional songs that are sung by the tribe, some of them by men, some of them by women, and it's a gorgeous thing, you know. And the only thing you hear in there is a little bit of like return B here for the accelerator reverb, and that's it. So even if I was to, you know, deactivate that clip, getting the right octave there would help. And stop, basically. And of course, not everything's going to fit, but, you know, you not stopping you, you know, running that out to a resample, sampling sections of it, getting really creative with it. It's all there. And this is not the only piece of vocal in here. And again, bear in mind that you can see the amount of instruments here. I'm only barely scratching the surface of what I'm showing you here. It's actually really, really deep. So in terms of this other kind of vocal, there's stuff like this. I mean, speaks for itself. And you can hear like whistles from the group and stuff. Wicked. And what's really nice is actually like the traditional shakers that they use during these ceremonial songs are also included. Let me just turn it down a little bit so it doesn't clip too much. So that can be used as like a wonderful fill, right? And there's like, again, flutes and stuff in here as well. And again, that can be torn apart and redone and resampled and transformed. And looped as well. So there's so much. There really is. There's so much creative potential. And what I like about it is that, like, I find sometimes with a lot of Kontakt libraries that, you know, they've tried to do all the work for you, and it's often that certain sounds and samples and stuff, like, they've already got processing on that you don't want, and you've got to unpick it. What I like about the Amazonic is that it keeps it really simple, and you can process it your way. It's not overly fussy. It's not overcomplicated. There's not 1,000,001 options. You can just get on with it, you know? So to finish off, there's like a couple of these interesting kind of more plucked elements. And like this kind of opens out a little bit of an interesting situation here. Because like if I were to, I'm just going to get rid of that browser so these things can be a little smaller. You've got like charangos. So what I've done is just like played a little bit of an ARP in basically and layered a couple of these things. So let's just have a little bit of a listen. You got more of like an acoustic guitar kind of vibe there. It's more like a kind of almost like kind of a lute in that kind of family of guitars. And play them together. Just a little bit of hybrid reverb on that, and that's it. I mean, it kind of speaks for itself, really, doesn't it? And yeah, I am being kind of like, I am unapologetically being a bit sort of sales pitchy about this. Do you know what I mean? But it is what it is, my friends. It is what it is. It's very, very, very good indeed. And is, again, for all the reasons I talked about on a personal level, like that, this project, the Amazonic, is just a wonderful thing. It really is. It's a beautiful thing. It is something that I think can do a lot of good in the world. And, you know, just purely on the basis of it being a great instrument, I mean, why not, right? So again, just to reiterate, you know, the most this will cost you is $249. Take 30% off that using the code capital P Paul Nolan 30 at the checkout. You get to save a bit of money. You get to make amazing music using these beautiful instruments, and you get to help. You get to give something back to these beautiful, wonderful people that, you know, we rely on so much to, you know, keep our environment safe, basically, because they are custodians of one of the most important natural habitats in the world. So, amongst other things that we've got to be thankful for. And again, remember, you know, episode 14 of Beyond the Studio, which, if you're watching this in April 2021, will be out sort of next week. I think it's the 10th or something like that, the second Monday of April 2021. And yeah, this is a wonderful bonus to the Organic House course here at MYT, which the genre seems to be growing in popularity. So it can only be a good thing. Amazing stuff. Kurt, that's a good question. I'm not sure how long it's been available for, but I will check and I'll find out, because it's a wonderful thing. It really, really is. It is a lovely thing indeed. It really, really is. I am wonderfully impressed with everything about it, quite frankly. So yes, marvellous stuff. Marvellous stuff. So there you have it. There is a bit of a walkthrough on the Amazonic.